Well, hello and welcome. My name is Ashley Chapman, founder of Engage Together and Justice U, and your host for this very special conversation on how the church community is uniquely positioned to help end and prevent human trafficking in your local communities. I can't wait for you to hear from our very special guest this evening, Charity Trahan, who's a dear friend and a warrior in this fight. Charity is the kind of person that when you meet her, you feel like you've known her forever. And once you get to know her, you want to keep forever. So I think you're going to be greatly informed and greatly inspired about all that you can do as a church community to move from awareness to action. But first, a few housekeeping items. First, tonight's session is recorded. So on the other side of this event, you will receive that recording. If during the event you'd like to send a question our way, take a look at that Q&A feature either on your laptop or your smartphone, and you can send a question our way. Our team will do their very best to get that question to us, and we'll do our very best to answer it in the time that we have together tonight. The other thing I want to point out is the chat feature. And in that feature, we'll be sharing with you resources and links and websites to things that we might be talking about tonight that you might want to follow up on. Lastly, there's no possible way in 30 minutes during the time that we have right now that we can cover absolutely everything there is that your church needs to know about how to engage this issue in your communities. Don't despair, though. We're going to cover a lot, and Engage Together is absolutely committed to providing you the resources you need to continue that learning journey so that you can reach impact faster. To tell you more about that, I'd like to introduce you to Alana Flora, co-founder and director of Engage Together. Alana?
Thanks, Ashley, and good evening to everyone. If you're not familiar with Engage Together, we exist to provide individuals and organizations the insights, the ideas, the tools, the resources, connections, and of course, the knowledge that they need to be able to make an impact in their local community. We create resources based off of the thousands of conversations that we've had with justice advocates, with organizations and programs that are working all across the United States. And as we talk with them, we're learning what is it that they're doing? What's working? What's not working? Where are their challenges? Where are their successes? Are they seeing some trends and changes in the movement and the way that traffickers are operating? And then, of course, what resources do they know or do they offer that we can then share with everyone else? And so those resources are collated into discussion guides and toolkits. They're going to be quick start guides or blogs so that when you have that question of, does this resource exist? Is there a church prayer guide? Is there a curriculum that we can incorporate? Does that social media post exist? We can direct you exactly where you need to go. That's because we're so passionate that every person in every sector is uniquely positioned to engage. We believe that you have skills that are unique to you. You have gifts and talents, resources and network that are exactly what's needed in your community to meet those needs. We want to help you understand on that journey from awareness to action, what it is that you need so that you can create the greatest impact. We're really excited tonight to be able to bring Charity to you because of her knowledge and her experience, the insights that she has in working with churches, in building those community partnerships. And so we're delighted that you get to listen in on this conversation.
Thank you so much, Alana. And without further ado, please welcome Charity Trahan.
Hey, how are you?
Hi, Charity.
So
welcome. Yeah, we're so thrilled you're with us. So, Charity, we know you very well, of course, and I'm still trying to remember how you and I first met. I think it's when we created the church teaching series together. So, if I recall correctly, years ago. By the way, that church teaching series is available on Right Now Media. If your church is engaged with that, you can go to the Engage Together church teaching series and grab that. It's also available on engagetogether.com/church. But that's where Charity and I first got to know each other, and Alana got to know Charity as well. But Charity, for those who don't know you at all, would you mind just sharing a bit about who you are and especially about how you became passionate about this issue and engaged?
Definitely. Like I said, my name is Charity Trahan, and I've had the honor of serving in this arena in all different capacities over the years since 2003. So how many years that would be now? Over 15 or so. So when I began the work, human trafficking was not a term you heard a whole lot. And so it's amazing to see. I've had the pleasure just over the years, just seeing how much the efforts have grown throughout just our country and globally with just awareness and all the amazing things that are happening. And so I'm just really proud of, all the efforts that everyone has been doing, and just love Ashley and Alana and the work they're doing. So I'm kind of became a tag along. They can't get rid of me. they're eternal cheerleader. So like I said, I started about 2003. I'm originally from St. Louis. I worked for Joyce Meyer Ministry. Some people may know Joyce Meyer. She's I guess a TV preacher, and worked there for 9 years. And I did some community effort. I started, all I knew at that time, I started in my early 20s. All I knew in that time is that I had a heart and I wanted to help people. And I wanted to help people who at that time I thought maybe were less fortunate, or possibly, just in need, that I can lend a hand. That's where it started for me. That's all I knew. And so God really just kind of, smacked me upside the head with what human trafficking was. And I think he's faithful in that way. And he really can guide you in that path if as you're just seeking him. And I started working at a community center, and through Joyce Meyer Ministries, and they wanted to start some outreach at the time to women, they said, working in the sex industry, and they wanted to begin a home. And since I had been involved in outreach for several years, I got involved with that. And as soon as I heard about the issue, I just knew in that moment I would spend the rest of my life being involved with it and being part of it. And that's where I've been today. So over the years, I worked as a caseworker at that home. I did ran street outreach. Eventually we moved and worked at another church, Healing Place Church, for 10 years. And my husband and I, he's from Louisiana, and we worked with foster care youth and done street outreach and after school programs, did a lot of community partner, kind of just mobilizing community partners and helping connect the dots in that way. And really, though, within all of that, it's been, for me, since 2003, started through the local church. So it's either been through a nonprofit that a local church has started, or directly working for a church. And that's another thing that I've been really passionate about, and why I've worked with a local church for so long, because I believe as a church, we can be the answer, one of the answers to the need in the community, specifically with human trafficking. And I know, Ashley, you said before that that in a church that there's every professional of every walk of life that can really wrap around this need. So that's the great thing about a church, is it's one of the few entities in the globe that we're really a community, and that if we just put our heads together well and we are committed, there's nothing that we can't tackle. And so I think as far as how many Christians are in the world, last I heard was a billion or so.
2.3, I think. Yeah.
2.3. Okay. So 2.3 billion of us together. So I think that's more than enough to tackle that 40 million number for that's human trafficking. So within the local church, very passionate about doing, and I've learned a lot over the years. And I really feel like the local church is really important. And I feel passionate about helping the church be at the table. Sometimes we're not at the table, and what table we're supposed to be at, what's the right table, to really get in there and get our hands dirty and serve our city. So in a nutshell, that's a little bit who I am.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Charity. Well, let's dive in there. So how does the church get at the table, right? Like, why? I think one of my first questions, I think you've already touched on, is why is the church so uniquely positioned to engage? And you referenced something that, yes, I am passionate about churches understanding, because you both have the church as the entity, but then you've got all your members. Yeah. So, if no matter what your city needs or where your church is situated, if you can think about it through both of those lenses, then you'll start to realize there's so much you have to offer. And it might be just an issue of educating your members about those opportunities, and it might be a church program that you create or one you enhance. But to tee it up that way to you, Charity, why is the church so uniquely positioned? Have we left anything out that we should say about that part?
Yeah, I think like we mentioned before, I definitely think uniquely positioned because we are a body that gathers regularly. Most of us gather weekly, if not twice a week, in small groups, and we're constantly in community, and so we are able to just gather and really wrap around any issue in our city, whether it's dealing directly with trafficking victims or specifically those things that lead up to it. There's so much, as we'll talk about, I know, and get into more, so much around this topic. So I think that is one reason. And I think that we bring hope. I think we're the best hope bringers that there is. I may be, prejudice. I know I'm a champion towards local church, but we can bring hope. We're hope professionals. So I think what our world needs and what our community needs, and especially the vulnerable need, is hope. and to see a path and a bridge. And I think that's something that we can do well. And I think that's how we're uniquely positioned. And we are also the benefit, I know over the years, the benefit of being a church is in a community, most people know about a church. And a lot of times, it's not a threatening thing. If you're the church lady that hands out sandwiches, which I've been called the church lady, that's handing out sandwiches in the street or whatever it is, where a church entity is known in the community of doing good. So I think it's a very safe way to engage the community where people don't feel threatened and feel safe and supported. And so I think that also is maybe a benefit as opposed to maybe some different other entities that are all part of the work, say law enforcement or government, very important. But I think as a church, we can have the benefit of coming in just very non-threatening and being able to serve, which is a position how we are very uniquely positioned, I believe.
Yeah, I love that. Alana, I know you work with so many churches. Also, is there anything you would add to that as well?
Churches are in every community, like Charity said, so they are a readily available resource. They are an army of people with skill sets, and they're already working directly with so many of the vulnerable populations that they may not know either as at risk or maybe a victim. So they're already perfectly positioned, interacting with those that we would say could be, like I said, at risk, or what are those identifiers that I am seeing? Oh, I didn't know that. So they're already in position to be activated.
That's good. So true.
I love that. So let's talk about getting activated as a church. So how does a church get started? What are the things that they should do? And my mind sometimes rushes to the things they shouldn't do, so we could pepper that in too. But Charity, I'll go to you first. What are the ways that a church on such a complex, pervasive, and very dark and sometimes scary issue, how do churches begin to engage?
Definitely. I would say the first thing is to start with educating yourself. So I think, and even if for me, I've been involved in this work for a long time and I'm always continue educating myself. I think coming at a place of, of humility, knowing that, even if you come and you're maybe a social worker or a teacher and you got involved through your church, even just knowing, okay, I'm going to educate myself and first know about the topic. And also, what is the new information that's coming out, new different ways. Like I said, there's been so much amazing things over the years. So there may be things that are out there. And one thing I will say, which I've been talking to Ashley and Alana about this, is when I started way back in 2003, it was definitely a desert of information for churches specifically. And I think one real practical step, just to advocate for their church teaching series, and which I was involved with, the fact that was there, if I would have had that then, it would have been so amazing, because it really breaks down all the different facets. Going through that series, a very simple next step with your small group or with your church or even with a friend or even yourself, if you want to start that way. I think those types of resources and education is very important first. And I think often as a church, which I believe it's God-given, God may have given our pastor a vision for his community or her community or the city. And I think tying in the vision of the church to serve their community with that education, those things tied together, you can be the most impactful. So for example, if your pastor has a vision to help the homeless, and that's something if he feels like God has spoken to him, and also, maybe specifically human trafficking. I think any of those different topics, knowing that vision and then continuing the education, because I think the methods are so great. The vision shouldn't necessarily change. The vision is the vision that God's given you as a church, but just the methods are so vast, that I think that education piece is really important. So I would say get the church teaching series if you haven't is one. And also being connected in your community. There's great places to get educated. If you're in a more rural area and it's more difficult, maybe there's not a coalition that's formed. A lot of cities have different coalitions around trafficking specifically. If there's not, even finding the closest one. I've had partners in the field over the year that they may drive a couple hours to get to their closest coalition, but they're usually more than willing to help about that. And I think, even being involved here with Engage Together, they have a great network and connection with people that can, know what's happening on the ground.
Yeah. And I want to press in, Charity, on that point about how do we start those conversations with people who we're not used to dealing with, right? So like law enforcement or coalitions or task forces. But before we go there, I don't want anyone listening in to miss this point. And Alana, I'm going to throw this to you, because I know a lot of churches they might have programs already for homeless populations or helping foster care kiddos or doing other things. And sometimes when you present this as a member of a church about human trafficking, people don't understand the nexus, and they may think, oh, that's in a separate bucket, and we're focused on this. So, Lana, what are some of those vulnerabilities that are in every way connected to human trafficking, and maybe, and then Charity too, chime in here. How do we help educate about that nexus? But Alana, I think I'll go to you first.
The best examples that I can give, and especially in a time of COVID, is with online safety. So youth leaders may say, oh, we're not really ready to talk about human trafficking. And we say, how about online safety? Because you have got youth groups of kids that are coming in that are on social media. They're telling their youth leaders, hey, I met this new person on social media. This is what we're talking about. Or they're bringing their friends, right, that are new, and their friends are saying, this is what we've done on social media. And so if you're talking about online safety, or you're talking about what healthy relationships look like, and February is National Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. And so it's a great way to integrate it so that we're helping set a really good standard of what a healthy relationship is. So when that vulnerable moment comes, a trafficker can't come in and say, this is actually what a relationship should look like. They can say, no, this is what I know it should look like. So that's one. If it's a missions team, you can be deploying education like Charity talked about, so that when they're in the field, whether that's short-term or long-term missionary, they know what to look for. So there's ways to just integrate it without having to start a new program, and equipping them in that way.
Yeah. And sometimes, Sherry, there's reluctance, right? So there may be an issue of just not understanding the nexus between what you're already doing. And there may be some reluctance, there. And that's one of the questions we have received from those of you listening in tonight. So how do we overcome reluctance for so many reasons, that might exist? How do we start overcoming that?
Good. So I think when it comes to areas, I think if there's reluctance, internally within church leadership, say that you feel like this is something God's spoken to you, and maybe you're a leader in the church or a pastor, and you're wanting to onboard everyone to get as passionate about as you are. I think one of those things, like I mentioned, is keep connecting to the vision, because I know as a pastor, or as a lead pastor, a leader of a faith-based entity, there's something very specific that you may feel like that God's spoken to you, and to be able to build on that. And so I think the education is key, because I feel like a lot of programs that churches may be doing, like you mentioned, Ashley, working with foster care youth or homeless, it all connects into the issue of human trafficking. And so I think sometimes we hear about human trafficking, the first thing we may say is, okay, we want to go right in the streets. How can we help with rescues and start a home? And not that that is not needed in our community, and that may be something that your church is being called to do. But, just to be able to take that moment and pause and say, okay, how do I educate myself on the issue? And if God is speaking to me, how can I connect that into the vision of church? Because your pastor will have ears to hear, because it'll be something that he's burdened with, or her, that, that feels like a mandate that God's called them to do. So how can I connect that in, and realizing in the education piece that you may already be involved in the effort of fighting human trafficking and not know it. And so that's been a huge thing, especially with churches. I believe we're involved in so much preventative work, and it's like you said before, Ashley, human trafficking is the end result of a lot of other things, that have gone wrong. And so that end result, if we're able to go upstream and help. So just like Alana said, there's so many different issues. So I think connecting to the vision, so you can speak the language of your leadership and your pastor to see. And I think that is really important. As far as in the community, I believe, you can, I've always come with one sentence when I've tried to begin to establish relations with the community, and it's, how can I serve? And I would say, how can I serve and learn? And I think if you show up at your police department, at your schools, or, as you're going through the research and finding out the need and getting educated on what gaps are in the community, or how can I come alongside, just that simple question of how can I serve and build that relationship and that credibility is really important. And, I was working with a foster care system in Louisiana. We really had a heart to serve in that area. And how we started was specifically that. We just said, how can we serve? Give us a list of things that we can be doing. And they gave us things from some youth needed shoes to, can you help us repaint our visitation room where the biological parents visit the children as they're trying reunification. So we did those types of things for many years. And as the relationship was built and it grew, we got educated more about the foster care system. And then also relationship was built and we could see the need. And so I think sometimes we can, get, paralysis a little bit with it, and get kind of stuck. And but everyone loves to know that there's somebody that can help with something. I've never gone into any room and said, "How can I serve and how can I learn?" and been turned away. And our community has many needs. Our police departments, our school systems are overburdened with just many needs, especially in the times that we're living in now. So usually, they may, shed a tear and give you a hug. Well, not right now because of COVID, but usually I get met with like, I don't even know what to say. I just about a year ago met with the police chief where we're located here. And we said, how can we serve? What can we do? And he said, I've never been asked that.
Yeah.
I don't even know how can we serve and what are our needs. So I think that usually helps hit a home run. And I would say, and I would add and learn, how can I serve and learn, and not coming always with an agenda right away, saying, here's our program, we want to do and present and convince you to build relationship, because relationship is going to be the thing that trumps any idea in the community at first. So
I love that. I love that, Charity. And it's so true, right? So some of the mistakes that we see churches make, and I'll go ahead and highlight those myself, are one, thinking that you're supposed to be someone other than the church. So thinking that you're supposed to be law enforcement when it comes to combating human trafficking, or you're supposed to be the local shelter, and maybe you're meant to support that effort, right? And maybe, and we have seen good models for this, maybe you're meant to really support it. Maybe you're meant to fill a gap in your community, but we're asking you to be you. And then I love the idea of being able to come to every person in your community, especially those that you don't have a relationship with yet, and taking the stance of, how can we help you? So yeah, tell me what you need and how can we help you? Other mistakes we see is people coming at it kind of going, hey, what's the problem here? Why isn't this fixed? We heard about this terrible thing in our community. Why aren't you addressing it? Well, that's not building relationship. That's not building bridges. That's burning them, right? So we want to come at it with the right, I think, Charity, you used the right word, humility, trying to learn, trying to soak in that knowledge, and being available to meet the smallest need that they have, because that's going to start building trust too. And Alana, you and I are actually on several task force meetings earlier today, across the country. I would love for you to share some of those needs that law enforcement or task forces or shelters have that churches can meet very easily.
One of the task forces that I attended, they were talking about how, just like Charity said, they had church members come and say, what is it that we can do? And there were so many, and their needs were so great as to how they could leverage the church. They built an entire church faith-based advisory council, so that anytime a need comes into that task force, so maybe that is a pair of shoes that's needed. One thing is sometimes law enforcement isn't able to use the funds that they have to buy food when they have recovered a victim. And so they're going there, it's 2 a.m, and they go, we really just want to be able to feed our victim right now, but we can't use that money. Well, the church is able to give them the $5 to $10 gift cards. They're able to say, hey, we packed the bag so that you've told us what we need. Again, not the church saying, I think you need a t-shirt and flip-flops, and here is some hand sanitizer. We're asking, what are the needs, and then how can we fulfill that? And so that's one way that I've seen task forces, whether that is that tangible gift card to provide meals, whether that is that backpack that's ready to go in law enforcement, or maybe they're being able to recover someone and they need transportation, and they've worked through all the legalities, of course, of that. But that's their first call, is a church, and that's what it should be.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I love that. I think it's so important that churches understand, don't you want to be the kind of, church or, community where when law enforcement or a task force or a shelter is in need, or presented with individuals who are in need, and their first impulse is to say, oh, we have friends that we can call to meet this need that we can't meet. And wouldn't you love to be the person that they call? And you can be, but you've got to start building that relationship and be willing to just, soak in knowledge and be responsive to needs that you are able to meet. Now, Charity, here's a question that was sent our way related to that, because there are so many needs in communities and right now, so many needs, so many needs in communities today, and so many vulnerabilities that are spiking, that are in every way connected to trafficking, housing insecurities, food insecurities, just family breakdown, drug addictions, lots of this that we're seeing upticks in the vulnerabilities that drive trafficking and the trafficking activity themselves. So if I'm a church and I'm looking at my community going, oh, wow, so many needs. How do we build something sustainable? How do we build something that we can make sure we can accomplish, not get lost in it, not stretch ourselves so very thin that we eventually get burnt out or overwhelmed? What's the strategy there?
Yeah, I think very simply, I think what all of us should do as churches is say start with what is in our hands. So we
Mhm.
talked a lot about education. So, at this point we're learning what human trafficking is if we don't already know, and what are maybe some of those preventative things that we may be doing. So starting with what is in our hand, as a church, we all have different I would say I call it like church personalities. There's different things that like I said, we talked about vision or different things that we love to do. A church I was at, they had in Louisiana, had a serious cooking team, like Cajun food in Louisiana doesn't play, and they would feed thousands of people. That was just something that was huge. A lot of people were involved with it. And so what is in our hands that we can do? How can we match what is in our hands that we can really connect? And I think even as a church, every church, I believe, should know their community. So one
Mhm.
thing is sometimes we launch out and we go do, and we don't know our community. It's taking time to know that, the Bible talks about serving your neighbors. And I think that word neighbor is so important because they all are our neighbors. And I
Mhm.
think we need to know what that is. So to begin to not only learn about the topic, get connected, figure out how you can serve, join a coalition, but also do the research and know the community, know literally demographically, okay, I know on this city block, these are the issues happening, and really begin to map it out. That's something that's always helped me to map out what is the area we feel like God's called us to serve, whether it's a neighborhood, a town, a region, depending on your church, and say, okay, what's happening, employing people to find that out. There's some great tools that Engage Together has to do community assessments, and there's tools out there and to assess and know what's happening, build relationship as much as you can. I always say the grandmas on the street know everything going on, know your community. Some of the best information I found out to help is from grandma, that we were serving food to every week. So everybody is a resource, to get information. And so I think those are the two main things: is starting with what is in your hands, knowing, like Ashley said earlier, I think filling a gap is very important. I believe the church is really called to fill the gap, and to be the first one for someone to call, I think is the role the church should be playing. But I also think like to come alongside is important. And so I think knowing what's in your hands, knowing what your skill sets are and what they are not. So I think that's something that's also very important. I was working with a church recently who wanted to do some large scale projects, and when it comes to and get grant funding and all these different things, and they asked, and I knew that they were called to that. That's something that they really felt part of what God was calling them to do. So I think that's really important of knowing that. Probably at first you may feel like you're called to all of it because if you're a community person, if you're an outreach leader or an outreach pastor or missions pastor or a leader, we all feel called to all of it. So I think another thing on a personal level is you may want to stop yourself a little bit and first and find out the need and really know what's in your hands and do the research. And I think that only Jesus can be Jesus. So we can't be savior,
Mhm.
but we can be his partner and
Mhm.
really and serve our community. So I think we can't get the savior complex and savior mentality, say we got to meet every need all the time.
Mhm.
And we got to say, okay, but God, where are we partnering with you? And if we partner in our lane where God's called us, then we allow everyone else to do what they're gifted at and in their lane.
Yeah.
And so I think those are a few ways.
Yeah, and a big part of that is to do a community assessment, as Charity said, and that is so critical because if we can take a look at positively and try to get to know everyone that's doing anything related to this issue, and that church teaching series, the church toolkits that we have available to you, all of this highlights the importance of that step. Alana, we break it down in a pretty crystal clear framework, for churches to consider. Could you share that framework for those listening in so they can start to think, okay, if I have an idea, it might fit in this bucket or that bucket, or this one, but make sure the idea you're coming up with is meeting a need in your city. If someone else is already doing it, help them do it well. But Alana, would you share a little bit more about that framework?
So that bucket, maybe first you're simply enhancing what you are already doing. So if you are doing homeless outreach, if you run your missions group, you're maybe incorporating awareness tools or assessments that you can include. The second would be that you are coming alongside that existing effort. So perhaps that's the Child Advocacy Center, an aftercare program, a drop-in center, law enforcement, and saying what are those needs so that we're, again, meeting those wish list needs, volunteer needs. And then lastly, it would be filling that gap. Maybe you've assessed, you found out what does human trafficking look like, In my community, it's the trafficking of foreign nationals in our area. Okay, where's the gap? We need translators. Does anyone in our church with the proper training, can they offer translation? And so you're able to fill that gap where it's not possible. So one of those three buckets, maybe all three, but definitely look to see if one of the things that's on your heart is able to fit with one of those three.
Thank you. All right, ladies, I cannot believe it, but we're already at our moment. So Charity, one last question to you.
Yeah.
If there's one thing that you want the church community to walk away with from this conversation today, what would that be?
I think one thing is don't give up. If you're in it right now and you're trying to navigate all of it and it feels overwhelming, don't give up. God will direct you. And I believe that the information is there and that God really has a plan for you. It's not an accident that you're listening to this. So know that there is community. I think accountability is something that's really important. I think being connected in a community and a framework and resources is hugely. The Bible says in a multitude of counsel in Proverbs, there's safety. So I think that is one thing I would recommend to everybody. Just get that multitude of counsel around you because there's safety in it. And also know, like it says in 1 Corinthians, that love never fails. If anything else, if you love well your community, it does not fail. It won't return to you void. Those seeds are planted and that hope is brought. So I think that is one thing as a church, it does not fail, that his love just does not fail. And if you ever question yourself or have moments of insecurity, just know if you're loving people, it won't fail.
I love that. As we say in the South, that'll preach.
Yes.
Good. All right. Thank you, Charity, so much for joining us tonight. And all those listening, I hope you're walking away greatly encouraged and inspired with ideas. Keep learning, though. We've got tons of resources for you on engagetogether.com/resources. And you'll also receive a quick start guide as participating in this event. Alana, I'll just throw her out there, will be available to you if you have questions. So just knock on our door. And if you have questions for Charity, we'll send them her way too. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you.